Welcome back, music lovers, to another installment of Battle of the Ballads 2002 edition. Last week, we were joined by the great Jeff Warden. And this week, we're back to the three of us lunkheads. Gregory, Joseph, welcome.
Hello.
Another great year.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to be this great. And I think it's because I thought a lot of these songs were released in different years. I even thought that I had forgotten about some of them. So it has led to a lot of nonstop listening for me for a few albums. So a really fun year. And a lot of great debuts, actually, Gregory.
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to mention something about that before. I'll let Gregory list them all, of course. But him and I were talking about it, and I realized how many amazing debuts they were. Because I started tracking them. Because every once in a while, because Gregory's big thing is he talks about notable ones. And so there have been a couple of times where like maybe I know something a little, or I'm talking about something a little bit more obscure, and he doesn't bring it up. But I was looking at how many songs I picked from debuts this year. I forgot the count, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So over half of my list are from debut albums. To put that into context, last week with 33 song choices, only 9 of them came from debuts. And I thought that was a crazy year.
Wow.
So to think over half of mine off debut albums is insane. But I'll let Gregory actually talk about what debuts they were, but they were just like insane. So many good ones this year.
Yeah, there were definitely a couple. Did you want to get to the user comments first, or do you want me to just jump right into debuts?
Now we can jump to the comments. I was switched up a little bit, and I was also on the wrong page on my track. So we did have a lot of comments this week. Some from different people too, which is also fun. We've been getting some newer people jumping in. Long-time listener Sherry Nutter Timothy gave us Blurry Puddle of Mud, Don't Let Me Get Me from Pink, Skater Boy Complicated from Avril, Good Morning Beautiful from Steve Holy. I'm going to say I think that's a country song. Wherever You Will Go from The Calling, and Underneath It All from No Doubt. Mitch gave us Any Eminem. Jessica Sniateki gave us Complicated from Avril, One Last Breath from Creed, Hot in Here from Nelly, and Don't Know Why from Norah Jones. Friend of the show, Tony D. Romanis, said we were introduced to the wonderful world of Audio Slave, and he also said, You Know You're Right from Nirvana. Ellen Sadler, who will be joining us in a couple weeks, she said a very female artist heavy year for her. Cry from Faith Hill, No Such Thing from John Mayer, I'm Gonna Get You Good from Shania, Complicated from Avril, I'm noticing a trend here. Come Away With Me from Norah Jones, Soak Up the Sun, Sheryl Crow. A New Day Has Come from Celine. She said the actual album version, not the garbage radio edit. And I don't know the difference between the two, so I'll check that out, Ellen. Hot in Here from Nelly, Landslide from The Chicks, 1,000 Miles, Vanessa Carlton, A Moment Like This from Kelly Clarkson. She said not a highlight of the year for her, but it feels significant as it's the first single release from an American Idol winner. I still say I was a Justin Guarini fan for that, but good job, Kelly. Chicago movie soundtrack and the Up album from Shania Twain. Randy Lee from Tennessee, the founder of Pops for Patience, gave us Avril Lavigne Tomorrow from her debut album Let Go. He is probably the biggest Avril fan that I know. And I don't know if you saw that comment thread, but he got deep down into it. Mel Bynum gave us Game of Love from Santana. Kevin Davis gave us Give Me the Light from Sean Paul. Love that track. Megan Otis said she feels like Lose Yourself by Eminem is a clear winner. Work It from Missy is still a great one. No One Knows by Queens of the Stone Age, and Do You Realize by the Flaming Lips she pulled out there. I think she also had The Scientist from Coldplay. It's a beautiful song. And then Hot in Here from Nelly should have just been played at her high school graduation. We had Raina Steger with Lose Yourself from Eminem, by the way, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Don't Let Me Get Me Pink, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous from Good Charlotte, Still Waiting from Sum 41, all the things she said from Tattoo, which I think I've listened to way too many times in the past 2 weeks. Kelly Susie, she asked if remixes count because Jamie Candeloro did a remix of REM's She Just Wants to Be on their remix album. And Charlene Ann closes out with Clocks from Coldplay, one of her all-time favorite songs, Justin Timberlake, Like I Love You, Chili Peppers, By the Way, Missy with Work It, and she was obsessed with the Avril Lavigne song I'm With You, but feels like nobody other than Nelly's Hot in Here should get it. So that rounds out the comments. We had a lot of new folks commenting, which is great. I didn't tag anybody this time around. I just wanted to do it organically, see who had a thought, and I think it worked pretty well. So thank you to everybody for sharing. Share your thoughts again in the future, and Don't forget to leave your comments on our thoughts on this channel as you like and subscribe.
It's a lot of comments. We've been getting really good interactions the last few weeks.
Yeah, I forgot to do the comments because I was just compiling all the comments before we jumped on here.
And if you would like to continue to participate in these discussions, remember to like, subscribe, and then comment down below so that this continues to hit your front page.
Yes, viewership has been up as well, which is greatly appreciated. It's awesome. I think we got over 60 views on the last one, so awesome stuff. I'm really excited about the debuts. I think that's why I wanted to jump to it, because there's a lot of fun to be had this year. And I really want to see what tricks Gregory pulled out with this one too, because I know he's got some deep cuts on this.
There were a lot of debuts. We talked about the first one I've listed last week because it's European debut, but Damien Rice album, which is one of the most important and influential albums for me. And it's interesting because it's not the last important album in my personal life that came out this year as a debut. Coheed and Cambria, which is a big one for Joe. Joey Ramone's solo album came out this year. Nora Jones, which is just a beautiful album. And You'll Know Us by the Trail of the Dead. Nappy Roots. I'd mentioned the EPs last week, but Against Me's first LP came out this year. And another one of those albums that's one of the most important albums for me. Ben Queller as well. Ben Queller, huge artist. I am rocking the Ben Queller shirt today. The shirt is older than maybe some of our viewers. So, Simple Plan, which is a great, fun album, came out at the perfect time for me because it's kind of a perfect high school album.
That is.
The Streets, Mike Skinner, British rapper. His first one was out this year.
Original Pyrite Material.
Exactly. All That Remains. The Walkmen, who is a band I always feel like I should like more than I do. And then, of course, with visual aids, we'll get to it in a couple years. I have like 3 albums for the Walkmen, and I think there's only maybe 4 or 5 tracks I like from them. Taking Back Sunday, Pretty Girls Make Grave. Michelle Williams and Kelly Rowland both had their solo albums this year. CeeLo Green, which he'd been around for forever by this point, but this was the first solo album. I think he was best known as being just one of the Dungeon family members before this. And of course, we're a couple years away from him really taking off. 50 Cent, major label debut. And it was a mixtape too, I think. But nice. I mean, really, really notable release this year. I think he sounds like Lesser Mace personally, but other people love him. Vanessa Carlton, The Decemberists, another one of those albums that's just so super impactful for me. One of those bands that's super impactful for me, but their debut. The Polyphonic Spree, I mean, best known for that episode of Scrubs they did where the whole band ends up playing in the ICU. Yep. The Black Keys debut album, this is, I think, the 3rd band I've listed now that I've seen at least 3 times. All of them debut albums this year. So that's how big these albums are. ELP's solo Boxcar Racer, one of 2 Blink-182 side projects this year that had an album. Little Big Town, I know I never mentioned country releases, but this was one. Tommy Lee's solo, Mastodon solo, which kind of is crazy to think it was this late because I kind of feel like Mastodon's just one of those metal bands that's been around for forever, and not quite forever. Maroon 5, The Used, Clips, Stone Sour, back I think before anyone realized that was Corey Taylor of Slipknot. Breaking Benjamin, 30 Seconds to Mars, or the Jared Leto Vanity Project. Okay, Go, Theory of a Dead Man, Hot Heat, Jason Mraz, Hilary Duff's debut album, which also was a Christmas album, which is hilarious. There was
that one I did not know.
Yeah, there was a number of Christmas albums this year.
Yeah,
there's always a couple, but it just felt like a lot, and they were being released as early as October, including, it's now credited as a Bright Eyes Christmas album, but the Saddle Creek record label has a solo or a Christmas album, and it came out this year as well. Transplants, which has the guy from Rancid and Travis Barker, so the second of two Blink-182 side projects. It's not a good album, but it is a fun album. Nick Carter released his solo debut after that disappointing run of pop music. Justin Timberlake also. I mean, how much does it suck if you're the pretty boy from the boy band and you release the album the same year as Justin Timberlake? Flight for the Conchords debut album was this year. It was a live recording of one of their shows, or maybe multiple of their shows that I'm not quite sure about. Audio Slave, which was mentioned by Tony. I've never been an Audio Slave fan. I just find them kind of boring. Talib Kweli, Kelly Osbourne, which that was a thing. She was
that the Papa Don't Preach release?
It was.
Oh.
And then Desperados, Read Music, Speak Spanish, which is just a great album from Conor Oberst. Joe, I know there's probably something I missed in there that's on your list.
Nappy Roots, their debut was this year.
Oh, how did I miss Nappy Roots? Because
you covered Nappy Roots. They made your list.
Oh, did I just miss it? My bad.
Yes, they made Gregory's list because I definitely smiled. They are actually in my top 5.
Frou Frou.
Was that this year?
That was this year?
That was this year. Who I mentioned, but I think that's unless I think you said Jason Mraz, but I also might have missed that. Yeah.
It was a very eclectic year, but I love seeing how women centered a lot of not only the releases, but the charting songs were. Very powerful year in music for women in just every genre. So it was really cool. And I remember like the Grammys and VMAs around those years where like the genres actually started getting together. Like Missy pulled people from like all different genres and stuff, like had stuff going. It was really fun. And it's interesting when I was looking back at this music, this is the first time like any country music really made my list. And it's because I think this is the year I started opening up all of my horizons for like all music out there instead of just like, you know, my rap, my metal, and my singer-songwriter. I opened up to like country and some blues and all that stuff. And so it was fun going through this year because I think this is the year in music that my musical taste completely changed.
Mine's literally the exact opposite of that.
I love it. I'm curious to hear your list as a result of that then.
Well, so what I was noticing a little bit last year, but more this year. So again, I've mentioned a couple of times, I'm a few years younger. And so this year was the year I moved to my father's. I moved in with my father and Gregory. And this was my first year in a new city. And I was in 6th grade. So I was incredibly nervous about being cool. And so my musical tastes were very, very narrow. At home, I listened to some of the more indie stuff that Gregory was listening to because I knew that was a cool thing to do. But then when it comes to, you know, like in my mind, pop music was for girls. The screaming kind of stuff was for the people who wore too much makeup and were off to the corner on their own at school, and I didn't want to be one of them. And I've just never really liked hip hop and rap. It's never really been my scene. And so it was like I had a very safe zone of like Breaking Benjamin and bands that were like that I felt that I could listen to and still maintain like some level of coolness, whatever that means. But so when I was going through this, things like the Decemberists I've listened to since then. I don't recognize anything when I look at them because I just haven't listened to a lot of them. But when I go back and I'm like, oh yeah, the Decemberists are awesome. I enjoy listening to them. And things I like more now, like Kill Switch Engage, I wasn't listening to back then. Same with Alexis on Fire released an album this year, and I wasn't listening to it because, you know, it was a lot. There's like that, the screams, the dirty vocals, and that was for the emo kids that were off by themselves, sort of. And so like I missed a lot of really good music through these years, and that's going to be a theme probably for the next 5 years that we do these.
I love that you can revisit that music through here and kind of and discover new stuff too that may have missed you around that time.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. But my list is a little bit long this year. So I'll kind of go through them a little bit quickly and only talk about a few of them at length. Taking Back Sunday, Gregory mentioned, had an album this year. Cute Without the E was on this album, which I love. It's a great song. The Streets, Let's Push Things Forward. One of the few kind of rap I was listening to at the time was The Streets. Simple Plan. I picked I'm Just a Kid off this album because I can remember when Gregory and I first heard this song, and it just kind of resonated with the both of us. Ben Queller, I'll save that one till later because that ends up in my top 3. Against Me released their debut this year. The Anarcho Punks Are Mysterious. Nappy Roots, I picked, I threw both Anna and Po Folks on this because they're just a lot of fun. Regina Spektor, Samson was released this year, which might be my favorite Regina Spektor song. Joey Ramone, as Gregory mentioned, did his cover of What a Wonderful World for this album. And it's just a beautiful rendition of that song. Coheed and Cambria. This is my least favorite of the Coheed albums, but Coheed has become one of my favorite bands in more recent years, just off the sheer fact that they're, as a band, I think they're my favorite storytelling band. When you consider like their first 5 albums are a connected story. 6, he took a break to write a album for his son, but then like 7 is back to the connected universe, but the start of another 5 album story, which is just insane. But he's just Claudio's such a great storyteller. Devil in Jersey City is my favorite off the first one. Damian Rice, I think Gregory will probably talk about this one at length, but The Blower's Daughter is my favorite off that album, the debut. Unwritten Law released both Seeing Red and Rest of My Life this year, probably their two most notable.
Oh yes,
probably my favorite. Maroon 5, funny, it is their debut kind of. They were a band before called Kara's Flowers, but this is their debut as Maroon 5, which had Sunday Morning and Harder to Breathe. Probably the only Maroon 5 songs I really like a lot. Nelly, Hot in Here, don't really like it, but I threw it on here because of the cultural impact. I don't like Nelly at all. OLP, Somewhere Out There. What was that?
I said don't sugarcoat it or anything.
No, I don't. I don't find it to be good music. I think it's annoying, but it was huge. OLP, Somewhere Out There and Not Enough are both off this album, which are both amazing tracks. My thumb was covering that. I thought that said UFO. This says NFG. Newfound Glory, My Friends Over You, and Sunny were both this year. One of my favorite early punk albums, early for me. Obviously not early punk, but Avril Lavigne. I don't like Avril as much as everyone else does, but I do actually really enjoy Complicated. I think it's a great song. Frou Frou, I mentioned in the debuts. Let Go was probably their biggest known track. It was on the Garden State soundtrack, but Breathe In also is amazing. Eminem, not my favorite of the Eminem albums, but Without Me, Sing for the Moment were off that album, and then Lose Yourself was on the 8 Mile soundtrack. Boxcar Racer, kind of a one and done side project. I think they only released the one album. I Feel So,
just the one.
Yeah, I Feel
So. It was
So,
a banger from start to finish. And I Feel So too. That was such a solid album.
It's really good. It's well done. The Get Up Kids. There's a couple of these where I started to rival Gregory with some of my picks because the Get Up Kids is in my list of maybe top 3 song runs, with High as the Moon, All That I Know, and Walking on a Wire. Those 3 tracks in a row, just absolute bangers. Weezer, again, not my favorite of the albums here, but Keep Fishin' is one of my favorite all-time music videos. It's done with the Muppets, and they have Waldorf and Statler at the top, and it ends with one of them saying, "Hey, they're not half bad," and the other one's like, "Nope, they're all bad." And
on a side note, because they didn't release a track this year, but had an a single release this year, but Saves the Day is second album or second single from the last album after At Your Funeral featured puppets and knockoff Muppets, but it didn't get MTV airplay, just MTV2 airplay. And then a couple months later, Weezer did the actual Muppets. So as much as I love Weezer, I hate Gone Fishing and this album because of that Muppet video.
Oh, they deboed
it. because teenage Gregory was like, no, fuck you. I want Saves the Day and their knockout Muppets.
That's like
Greg's a GoBots fan, aren't you?
That's like
No.
what was it? So Fell in Love with a Girl is with Legos. And then like a few months later, that video was released that was all cardboard, and it's basically like the same concept, but cardboard is the Legos.
Yeah.
I cannot remember what the cardboard song is, but the Decemberists I mentioned as kind of a band I look back at and I enjoy, but I honestly, when I pulled up the album, I didn't recognize a single song, but I wanted to shout them out anyway. Goo Goo Dolls, Here Is Gone, Lifehouse Spin, Not a Surf. I think their next album is my favorite of theirs, but Inside of Love off of that album. Okay Go, Get Over It. What great videos. They always just made amazing music videos. Stone Sour, Bother. Bright Eyes is on there, as well as one of my top three song runs with Lover I Don't Have to Love, Nothing Gets Crossed Out, and Waste of Paint. I believe they're all in order on that album.
They are indeed. It was almost a 3 run for me, but I'm trying to keep it to 1-3 run because I've gotten a little crazy with the 2 runs. So
I really noticed there's 2 others from this year that I had to mention. And I just thought it was funny because I started noticing it because you started doing it. But that's my favorite of the Bright Eyes albums. I know it's not Gregory's, but that's my favorite. The Linkin Park Reanimation was released this year, and although I don't really like the album all that much, and I hate the names even more.
Hate those names.
It's so bad. But Points of Authority, the remix off that one actually is amazing. Common featuring Mary J. Blige, Come Close. My favorite Common song, probably the only one I could name. Sum 41, Still Waiting. Matchbox 20, Bright Lights and On Well. Three Doors Down. I don't like this Three Doors Down album in general, but Away from the Sun is a good song.
Great track.
Foo Fighters, All My Life, Times Like These, off that album. Jason Mraz, The Remedy from his debut. Chevelle is my third 3-song run. Send the Pain Below, Closure, and The Red.
Such a great album.
Good Charlotte I threw on here, although I didn't appreciate Good Charlotte until I was much older, because Good Charlotte was another one of those tweener bands that was like, when you got really, really pop punky, it was like for screaming 13-year-old girls as well. And so 13-year-old Joe thought that was bad. But the anthem in Girls and Boys I actually really like now, which is my long list, my short list of my runners up. This year actually sucked picking a top, because 3 of my all-time favorite albums were all released this year, and it was painful to have to pick one. Ben Queller's Sha Sha was released this year. How It Should Be, Lizzie, and Fallen were all some of my favorite songs of all time, but I'd probably pick Lizzie as my number 3 song of that year. Number 2, where did I put number 2? The Used, their debut album, The Taste of Ink, Poetic Tragedy, and Blue and Yellow. Again, this is one of my all-time favorite albums, and this is one that meant a lot to me growing up. Poetic Tragedy there is my number 2. And it came down between Breaking Benjamin and Something Corporate. These are 2 of my favorite albums of all time. Breaking Benjamin, from beginning to end, of this one, Saturate. Natural Life, one that didn't get any airplay, that's probably better than all of them. Next to Nothing. But my number one runner-up is Home by Breaking Benjamin, with I Want to Save You by Something Corporate, kind of taking the number one spot.
Nice.
Another special shout out though to If You See Jordan.
You can't steal all my Something Corporate songs, Joe.
I'm just this one. I mean, I could list that entire album. Leaving Through a Window really meant a lot to me. I have a lot of really specific memories of this time in my life related to that album. I can remember seeing the video for If You See Jordan the first time with Gregory. Sort of. I very distinctly remember we were sitting in the living room watching music videos, but I'm pretty sure that living room was our Aunt Debbie's.
Yeah, we were at Debbie's, and we did not go to school that day because our step grandfather Andrew had passed away in his sleep, and they needed someone to sit with the body, and we were the only ones available, and they didn't want to ask just one of us, so they kept us out of school. Which I don't know if it was the same for you, Joe, because I was out of the state for your deep high school run, but I didn't miss time in school unless someone passed away. So when we went back to school the next day, my good buddy Detulio, who if you had a conversation with Detulio, you'd think he was a complete idiot, but it was usually just a show. And I walked up that morning, he's like, so who died? And I'm like, what? He's like, you never miss class unless someone dies. And I'm like, oh shit, I didn't realize that was that predictable. But yeah, no. So that was a weird day for us.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to go into next. I'm glad you filled it in because there are definitely some spots I'm blanking on. But that song has resonated with me for that reason. But also, I Want to Save You. I've posted about this on Facebook as well. But that song is so deeply ingrained in my brain and memories that when it comes on, there's even a specific part of Super Metroid that I am taken back to, and I'm like, man, like when I hear that song, it's 13-year-old me playing Super Nintendo, this very specific part of this game until 6 a.m, just carefree, having a good time. And every time I hear that song, I'm flooded back with those kind of memories. So I Want to Save You, Something Corporate, my number one. And it was painful to have to pick that over Breaking Benjamin.
So I don't have as interesting of a story, but mine and Lauren's first concert was actually Something Corporate at Brockport freshman year, and they played with Catch-22 and Love Drug, and I actually almost left the concert because Something Corporate themselves played for like 2 hours and 45 minutes after these other two bands had played, and we had been standing on it. So it was in Tuttle South because they didn't expect anybody to go, so it's the shitty basketball floor that they don't take care of anymore, so there's like no give to it. And like our knees were creaking by this point because we had been at the show for 4 hours for 3 bands. But Andrew McMahon just went on this tear on the piano. I think Constantine ended up being like 29 minutes long live there. And but they did Punk Rock Princess acoustic, which just completely blew my mind. And so I'd known a few from college radio, but like seeing them live automatically put them in, like, I think that's still my top 3 concerts of all time. But that put them just automatic on my like peripheral, like anything they ever released, I'm a fan for. So
they ended up releasing an acoustic version of Punk Rock Princess, right, on like the Galaxy sessions.
Yeah, they did later on, but it was this is back in like the Napster days where you could find like the bootleg shit too. So it's like I remember the one from the Brockport concert, like somebody had recorded and then like took the 4 days it took to upload a track, and then we all got it. We're like, oh shit, LimeWire, and we all had it. And we're like, listening to it like that was from Tuttle. It was just wild because we were just going to a concert to go to a concert. Like we knew like If You See Jordan, and I think I Kissed a Drunk Girl was out then or whatever too. Like we knew that stuff. But we weren't like huge, like, oh yeah, we got to see them. And I was actually going for Catch-22 because I love them. They played so many shows in Rochester, and then I just became an instant fan that night. Great choice, Joseph. Now we get to Gregory, and please don't steal my Damien Rice song.
I may have stole your Damien Rice song. I can't promise anything. But first, you just mentioned the whole LimeWire thing. And I love how mislabeled tracks are on LimeWire. You'd have to guess what the wrong title might be on LimeWire. And one of those situations was we discovered Unwritten Law at this time because this album was so good. And the Vandals have a track that is often mislabeled as My Girlfriend's Dead is the name of the track, but it's also often mislabeled as An Unwritten Law. So that is an interesting thing. So I thought for about 6 months that Vandals track was an Unwritten Law track until I encountered the Vandals just randomly somewhere and realized, oh yeah, no, that's definitely the Vandals. But
So we had many arguments on our iPods because we all had stuff listed as it was from like our downloads. And so it's like, well, LimeWire says this is the person singing it. It's like, no, I assure you it's not. Well, no, this is what the download says.
Brand New was the hardest like band to ever find songs for because their titles are like 50 words long and have nothing to do with the actual song that they're singing.
Oh, yeah.
What is Jude Law and Semester Abroad?
Not in 2002, but coming up in 2003, especially spring and summer, I started moving things into media players so I could change the name to the proper name and I could burn the CDs in the right order. I still have many of those CDs. But yeah, that leads me into Unwritten Law, as Joe mentioned too. And Joe mentioned a lot of his all-time favorite albums are this year. That might go doubly for me. I'd mentioned losing a young lady I was madly in love with in high school. That was January of 2003. So a lot of the 2002 tracks held a lot of impact to me in January 2003. So we're going to get in that a little bit. But Unwritten Law, Mean Girl, Up All Night, Rest of My Life, and Actor's Model. Those are my favorites other than the ones Joe mentioned. But I mean, basically this could have been the whole album. This is where I might crush Dan if I pick his Damien Rice track, but this is my best 3-track run of the year. Cheers, Darling, Cold Water, and I Remember, but it could be anything off this album. I love this album, and it's one of those that in that January 2003 mode, this album was often in the CD player. Like it was just great. The Mountain Goats released 2 albums this year, and much like the previous Mountain Goats releases, it's hard to pick just a track off because the albums just flow back to back to back. But off the first album, The Best Ever Death Metal Band in Texas, and off the second album, No Children. Those are 2 tracks that I think have been played all 3 times I've seen the Mountain Goats live, and they're all great. Joe mentioned What a Wonderful World off that Joey Ramone album. I re-listened to the Joey Ramone album last night / this morning at work. And it's interesting to hear Joey Ramone take that like somber, like loving thing, but I kind of just want Joey Ramone to be Joey Ramone. But What a Wonderful World, as recorded by Louis Armstrong, is, I think, the greatest song ever recorded. The fact that you can hear Louis Armstrong smile as he sings it is just amazing. But to hear Ramone cover with such warmth and feeling as well is also just kind of a stark contrast to what you think of as the Ramones. The whole album is kind of like that, but this one's the only one that I think it works to that same degree. Against Me, Reinventing Axl Rose and Baby I'm an Anarchist, that might be the best 2-track stretch. Ben Queller, much like Joe, this is one of my all-time favorite albums. How It Should Be, Shaw Shaw, those are 1 track, by the way. In case you are not familiar with Ben Queller, which shame on you. Commerce, Texas, Walk on Me. Those are my 3 favorites off that album. But like Joe said, you can pick anything off that album. Lizzie's amazing. Like Fallen is one of many soundtrack songs that were released this year. One Day in Perfect Plan, or One Day in Perfect from Simple Plan, is another 2-song stretch for me that was great this year. Joe mentioned Let's Push Things Forward, but also We Become Heroes is a great track off that. Pedro the Lion Second Best, I think, is my favorite song of his completely. Elvis Costello and the Imposters released an album this year, and it's kind of it's fun to think how the stretch of his career. In my newsletter, I jokingly said I wanted to give a rub to a new artist. I picked one off this album, I think. It's been a long week already, but Spooky Girlfriend and When I Was Cruel #2. Costello actually released 2 albums because he released like live and rare tracks as well, which has his cover of My Funny Valentine on there, which is my favorite version of My Funny Valentine. Still Fly, Big Timers, The Decemberists, off this album, Here I Dreamt I Was an Architect, which is another. The Decemberists are kind of a soundtrack band in general. Even if you can't place them, you've definitely heard them in the back of a few movies and shows. But Here I Dreamt I Was an Architect was used in How I Met Your Mother, I think in the 3rd season, where Ted is at his architecture table in his in his apartment, and it's just kind of perfect. And then Cautionary Tale is also great off that. Something Corporate, Straw Dog, and Drunk Girl. Those are two of my favorites. Straw Dog was my password for many years in high school. Hey Ma, Cameron, which is my favorite Cameron track.
Yes, as it should be.
We mentioned the Get Up Kids, Overdue, High as the Moon, Walking on a Wire, but this is one I thought about using just like a blanket whole album as well, because that's the kind of year this was in music for me. Eminem, Without Me, and My Dad's Gone Crazy with Haley J. Those are my 2 favorite tracks off that album. There's too many terrible skits on this album. Atmosphere had Fuck You Lucy and God Loves Ugly on this release this year. God Loves Ugly is just so good. Newfound Glory, My Friends Over You. The Black Keys, She Says, She Said, and I'll Be Your Man are my 2 favorites off that debut album. Chili Peppers, much in the vein of Costello, just still releasing music. I mean, still releasing music today, but By the Way and Zephyr Song are the 2 best off that. I listed the whole Lifted Bright Eyes album, and I know I've gone on. It's not my favorite album. Joe mentioned it again. But the thing about it is it's the most polished album up to date, and I don't think there's filler. And that's the thing with the highs of the earlier Bright Eyes releases for me are higher, but there's not a track I would say shouldn't have been on this album. Just top to bottom, it's just a really, really good album. It's the first time he's got real production on a release. So it was hard for me to just narrow one down. If I were to have narrowed one down, it would have been that same 3-song stretch Joe gave, or maybe the Let's Not Shit Ourselves would have been another one that could have just broken it up if I didn't want to do a 3-song stretch, which I've done a few times. I didn't want a 3-song stretch, so I'll grab 2 tracks earlier in an album and 1 track late in an album.
I honestly would have expected you to pick Bowl of Oranges.
Bowl of Oranges is so good. Love Or Have It On. Love is so good. I mean, top to bottom, there's not, like I said, there's not a miss on the album.
This is another one, that all-time great music video, Bowl of Oranges.
Bowl of Oranges really, really is good. Yeah, so good. Spoon, The Way We Get By, another one of those soundtrack songs. Like the list of things it's been in is just insane. But as much as I love that track, my favorite is All the Pretty Girls Go to the City, which is a fun track. And it's also, if I'm visiting a new city, first time, second time, 100th time, that song runs through my head, which might speak to the wanderlust I suffer. Joe had once mentioned that he told Amanda he was shocked I was in Pittsburgh as long as I was, because it's been like 7 years. And that's just how I am. 35, still don't want to set down roots, but I hear that song when I travel, and I think it just goes back to how I always want to just be somewhere else. Grindin', Clips, Breaking Benjamins, Polyamorous, and Skin. This one was a hard one for Not a Surf, so I've given the most ridiculous thing I've done so far. I have my best 7-track run. And that's the first 7 tracks from this Not a Surf album. Blizzard of 77, Happy Kid, Inside of Love, Fruit Fly, Blonde on Blonde, High Speed Soul, Killian's Red, and The Way You Wear Your Head.
Did you just stop where it goes to French?
Yes, actually I did. That's exactly what happened. Well, I was going to stop before The Way You Wear Your Head, because even though I don't understand what they're saying in that song, like, it sounds really good. All the French songs Not a Surf do sound really good. And it kind of goes back to that Dylan, the lyrics don't need to make sense. They just need to sound good. Beck is similar to that. But yeah, no, I was going to stop The Way You Wear Your Head, but then I remember just how much I love that track. So it was tough, because I don't want to ever do more than one. I had to pick the whole album. But the Get Up Kids, Ben Queller, so many that I could have just done the whole album. Riley Kiley, Better Son and Daughter and With Arms Outstretched are two great tracks off that one. Ben Folds released Ben Folds Live, which isn't overly notable except for it's the first like time Rock This Bitch is available, which is just, for anyone who doesn't know the history of that, is someone yelled Rock This Bitch to Ben Queller, and so he made up a song called Rock This Bitch. It changed every night. He retired it for a while, but then he brought it back, I think, maybe retired it again. But yeah, so that was always just a great thing for Folds fans that saw him. Tom Petty, Have Love, Will Travel, and The Last DJ are the two tracks off that album that I really, really like. Jurassic 5, What's Golden, and Thin Line featuring Nelly Furtado. Nelly Furtado was featured on a handful of hip hop tracks this year. And I almost listed them every time I encountered them just because it's so great that she's part of it, but not all of them are worth mentioning. LL, 10, this was his 10th studio album.
Oh, I forgot that was the one with Love You Better on it, wasn't it?
Yeah, Love You Better and Paradise are the two ones that stuck out to me. There's another one that's a bonus track we're going to get to in a couple songs. The Red, Chevelle, but that's 3-song stretch. Joe List is all great. Poem from Taproot. Mm-hmm. Justin Timberlake, Like I Love You featuring Clips, and Senorita. I know those aren't the two biggest tracks he released that year, but I don't talk about the other one. Get By, Talib Kweli. I mean, it's got to be a top 10, 15 hip hop track. It was, remixed and rapped on by everyone after that, and just such a brilliant track. And then All I Have featuring LL Cool J off the J-Lo album. This is so much better than that track featuring that other rapper she did the year before. Joe mentioned Commons Come Close featuring Mary J. Blige, and that's great. Greater Omaha and Mall of America off the Despercitos album. The whole album just flows so well together. Top tracks of the year: Pints of Guinness Make You Strong by Against Me. It's just brilliant. Wasted and Ready, Ben Queller, I think is my all-time favorite Ben Queller track. I reserve the right to change that at a moment's notice, though. Punk Rock Princess, young 15, 16-year-old Gregory. That's what he wanted, was a punk rock princess. Hannah, Hold On, Get Up Kids. The unfortunate thing about the Get Up Kids is when I saw them a couple years ago, they derided this whole On the Wire album. I think they played one track off it in the 2 hours we saw them, and they just kept calling it their emo album. They played more because I believe it's the bassist was in James and the Kids Table, or Big James and the Kids Table, whatever the band was. They played more tracks from them than they played from this album, which is their highest selling and charting album. But whatever, their music, they can do what they do. I'd see them again just to see them play one track off this album. So this is where it was hard. I couldn't narrow down one because I'd mentioned the Losing Someone, and Beck's Sea Change album still to this day brings tears to my eyes. And that the stretch that really gets me going is Guess I'm Doing Fine and Lonesome Tears, which I think are 3 and 4 or 4 and 5 in there. But even the opening Paper Tiger. So my song of the year is the 2-song stretch of I Guess I'm Doing Fine and Lonesome Tears. Just because I couldn't narrow them down because I've never listened to one without the other. So, and that's just the emotional connection to music, which really, if there was an emotional connection to music, would we be here at all? So I couldn't narrow it down, and I'll understand when neither of you guys vote for this 2-song stretch. So I was like, fuck it, whatever, our list, our rules.
Yep.
Roll with that. Throw some variety in there. Yeah, we actually covering a lot of genres here, which is amazing.
I have no idea how, when we get to picking between 2000 and 2009, how we even managed to do that. I'm gonna be pissed when it's not one of mine. Like, I'm gonna be legitimately upset when it's not one of my picks.
I'm gonna enjoy listening to this.
I know Dan put a poll up like after we recorded for the last time. We might have to do a poll up and just refer to the poll.
Yeah, it's tough because we all have different reasons for our songs, and I think this was my most eclectic list I've had thus far, and you guys actually just helped me weed out, I think, 17 songs from my really long list. So I appreciate that. So I'm going to have an abridged list at the moment of songs that weren't sad for the most part. And these are mine. So I had Ordinary Day from Vanessa Carlton. I absolutely love Vanessa Carlton. Ordinary Day and White Houses are my two favorite songs from her. White Houses was not released in this year. I had Addicted and I'd Do Anything from Simple Plan. Dilemma from Nelly and Kelly. I love that track. I know, Joe, you said Nelly was annoying to you. I enjoyed his first 2 albums and I couldn't stand anything after that. But that's also, we used to listen to it like Country Grammar while playing basketball all the time. The second one while playing basketball, so it was just on in the background during the summer. Always from Saliva. I didn't like the song then, but in listening to it now, I actually enjoy it, which is weird. I had Here Without You and When I'm Gone from Three Doors Down simply because they drove alternative rock radio somehow that year, like even when Our Lady Peace came out with their stuff. So somehow they stayed on after their debut, and I was shocked because these songs in this album were so generic as opposed to how well written their previous album was, besides Away from the Sun, which was just a great track.
I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Well, and I wonder how much that has to do with, like, I don't have a lot of traditional alt rock on my list this year. Joe didn't either. We're all kind of like sub genres in there. Mm-hmm. So how much is it that even though these aren't the best Three Doors Down tracks, they're still better than a lot of what the alt rock that was out at the time?
It's very true.
I don't know if that plays as much a role, because honestly, Here Without You was on the radio for years. It got more radio play and outsold their first album,
which was wild.
The song's garbage.
If you look at what we were coming after, that was the album that came after 9/11, and they had all the voiceovers for, you know, the military love tracks, like all that sort of stuff on it. And so marketing timing was all perfect at that time, which kind of drove that whole album. Because if you notice after that, they didn't quite disappear, but they weren't quite there either after this album. Beautiful and Dirty from Christina. Disease was my favorite track off that Matchbox 20 album. California from Phantom Planet. Can't Get You Out of My Head from Kylie. I love Kylie Minogue, just a big fan. Innocent from OLP was my favorite track off that Gravity album. Still listen to it nonstop. I still see them anytime I can. Phil Collins got some love this year. Can't Stop Loving You. Such a great track. And I always forget it was out this year. I'm always like, oh, that came out like the 80s because it's just Phil Collins. But that track actually came out that year. My Something Corporate song, since you guys stole them all, was I Woke Up in a Car. I absolutely freaking love that song and the story that it tells and the picture that it paints. And actually, every time I get a tattoo, that song is in my head just because of him talking about the tattoos in the song. So Cannonball, my Damien Rice song. I absolutely love that. I think that was my last AIM message that I ever put up, and I just left it. So as my Married to a Midget AIM account was retired due to my wife's height, that was the last thing that was up there was Cannonball lyrics. I went with Cleaning Out My Closet and Superman from Eminem, that album, just because they weren't said. I really wasn't a big fan of that album, to be quite honest, but there's a lot of love that was shown to it. Coldplay, Clocks, In My Place, The Scientist, Warning Sign, an album I didn't grow to appreciate until probably 10 years later. It wasn't cool like Coldplay at the time they came out, but I also just thought Chris Martin seemed like the biggest douche, so I wasn't about to support the music. Then I found out he's actually a pretty decent guy who did a lot for like local musicians and stuff. So
somehow a pretty decent guy who still is a giant douche. So.
yes, does a lot from the heart and with his money, but still comes off as a pompous jackass.
I think his voice is one of the most boring in all of music. Anytime I turn them on, I get why Clocks and The Scientist are so well liked, but something about his voice is like getting shot with an elephant trunk for me.
Well, it's funny that you say that,
it puts me out.
I remember I was in a coffee house just it was down the street from me. I needed peace and quiet when I was finishing my thesis for grad school. And there was a singer. She was just doing acoustic, coffee house style music. And she was covering a bunch of Coldplay songs. Like, wow, these are fantastic. And I'm just like, it's not dawning on me that they're Coldplay songs because I was enjoying them so much. And they sounded so good with her voice. Like lyrically, I think that Chris Martin writes a lot of great lyrics, but he's also great at putting me to sleep. I had a chance to see them for free and I was like, nah, I'm good. Like many years ago, just because I didn't think it'd be an enjoyable concert. But I do, in hindsight, love those tracks. The lyrics are really incredible on those. There's no I in Team from Taking Back Sunday. Days Go By from Dirty Vegas, but not the radio version. The acoustic version is absolutely haunting. If you haven't heard it, it needs to be used in like every penultimate moment of a TV show because it's just that chilling. So Days Go By, acoustic version from Dirty Vegas. I recommend it. Drunken Lullabies from Flogging Molly, still one of my favorites. Fine Again from Seether, as a shout out to my wife, because Seether was like one of her favorite bands when we met, and that just totally threw me for a loop. That this tiny little 4'11" person from the Bronx like Seether. So shout out to her. And she actually introduced me to them. Get Low from Lil Jon and the East Side Boys featuring the Yin Yang Twins, because where would we be in the world without that song coming about? I put that
probably
on here.
About the same place, just a little bit better.
I put that on here because that's actually was the year I went off to college, and that song pretty much brought everybody together in the dorms of like, hey, this song is on. I guess we can all congregate. So
it was also on the Need for Speed Underground soundtrack.
Was it really?
Oh yeah, it was like the opening song, like as like the opening like cutscene starts and everything.
Oh, nice.
Oh yes.
Girl All the Bad Guys Want from Bowling with Soup. She Will Be Loved in This Love from Maroon 5. I still actually get down with This Love. That was actually a really good rock track. And then Adam Levine took off. Head On Collision from Newfound Glory. I go with Sympathy from Goo Goo Dolls. I think that's actually my second favorite Goo Goo Dolls song, and very low-key and underrated. I Believe in a Thing Called Love from The Darkness, and I don't say this as somebody who likes the song. This was probably my most hated song that was released for a good 15 years. Where it came on, I just got cringy, and I wanted to like Kyle Walls, because it just, I don't know what it was about everything that came together in that song, but I absolutely despised it. And then my DJ'd a wedding many years later, and I was asked to play that song multiple times, and like all these PTSD flashbacks came back of my hatred for this song.
So I love that song. I don't know how I missed it.
Well, I don't know. I could not stand that song for some reason. I don't even know what it is. Like, I can't even pinpoint it. It just, the second I heard it, like all of my senses went off, and I wanted to eliminate from the universe. Made You Look from Nas. And I Melt in These Days from Rascal Flatts. And Ellen, no, you will not be getting the VHS of me singing I Melt or These Days, which we discussed the other day. She's trying to blackmail people from my solo I did. Jenny from the Block from J-Lo. Like a Stone from Audio Slave. I know you guys think he's boring, but I honestly will hang on to any Chris Cornell I can. My Paper Heart and Swing Swing from All American Rejects. No Shirt, No Shoes, No Problem from Kenny Chesney. Again, this is the year I started accepting some country. Over My Head from Sum 41. I think that's actually my favorite Sum 41 song. I absolutely love that track. Prayer from Disturbed. Superman from Laszlo Bain. Just, I think, probably my favorite show theme. Just a great track. The Other Side, Dead in the Water, and Be Mine from David Gray, one of my favorite musicians of all time. I know he puts a lot of people to sleep. I absolutely love him, especially the songwriter. Great album. You and I Both and Curbside Prophet from Jason Mraz. Curbside Prophet's my favorite Jason Mraz track. Love it. The Seed 2.0 from The Roots. Tariq just laid it down on that. Aha and Bump 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 from B2K, because I just can't leave the year without mentioning them. What It Is to Burn from Finch. Love that track still. I will blast it every time it comes on. Watermelon Chicken and Grits was probably my favorite album of that year from Nappy Roots. So Country Boys, I really love that track, and another one of theirs actually comes up in my top 5, and I did narrow it down to 5. And up until this morning, I had passed the Cavassier, but fuck Busta Rhymes, and so after yesterday, so we're gonna go to my top 5. I have Get By, Talib Kweli, Po Folks, Nappy Roots, The Good Stuff, Kenny Chesney, the first country song to make any of my top anything.
Wow.
I Can from Nas and Complicated from Avril. And I actually went with I Can from Nas. I think it's just a track that got forgotten about that year, but resurfaced so many times and many years afterwards, especially in various cultures. And I remember, you guys know our dear buddy JJ and Roy, the three of us ran a camp for students from an urban area, and we used that song in like the graduation video, and they just absolutely loved it. And so I saw the meaning of that song to so many kids, and I'll forever hold that that moment with me in that song. And every time I hear it, I think of those awesome moments in that DVD, and I pop it in every now and then too. So I went with I Can from Nas because I just think it had a lot more meaning than the world was ready for at the time. So I Can, Nas. It just edged out Complicated from Avril, and that was an easy decision for me, but those are my top 2.
I somehow forgot I Can came out that year, because I know like the compilation album was out that year, and I forgot there was like new material on that stuff. So
I think, yeah, it was like that and Made You Look. And
Yeah.
I think there was like 2 others. But yeah, even just the arrangement on that track, I appreciate it more and more every time I hear it, because like the pianos and it's sample on top of sample on top of sample, which just wasn't being done at that time. It was like a musical architect just putting all the stuff together. Signed with Nas, and I'm okay with that. I like that we had very eclectic decisions, especially moving forward. And this whole thing, I was just kind of looking at where we are so far. So another year down, and I don't think it gets any easier, to be quite honest.
I don't either. And in fact, I think next week people are going to hear some repeats because we're getting into that, that complicated moment where Swing Swing was released as a single in 2002. The All American Rejects album was 2003. So the All American Rejects is probably going to come back up next year.
This is when the punk labels were releasing the EPs before the LPs, and then sometimes not even re-releasing, just selling random cardboard covered CDs like on tour. It was such a crazy time. Like when you go to try to track list a lot of these songs, especially for that genre, bands were even on like multiple labels within the same year. Like it's just wild how a lot of this works. And you mentioned like Maroon 5 that year, they had just gotten done with their previous name, previous label, and then joined this one and released all the material that was supposed to come out with the original label. Like it's wild. I think it's from like 2001 to 2007. There's just this like hodgepodge of bullshit when it comes to like release dates, what was on what album. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. There's actually a band that could repeat in every year with the same album. So it could be a lot of fun.
Well, it's interesting too, because like we see Matador and Merge Records like as these big indie labels too that are very artist friendly, replacing some of the older indie labels that were more controlled by Sony or something. This is also the year with his 10th album. Def Jam gave LL Cool J the rights to his music, which I don't know that everyone realizes like the impact of that. I know Paul Brunner can talk about like the royalties and everything, because it's just insane how little money they make off the rights to this music. And so that was just it was a sticking point for LL Cool J earlier in his career when Foxy Brown did Fox the Bells cover of Rock the Bells, and Def Jam pitched it to her as like a tribute to him because he's got a greatest hits album coming out, when really it was LL Cool J wanting to remix it and Def Jam saying, no, fuck you, sign the contract, we own the rights to this music. And I think that's kind of like these up and coming bands in this time were a little bit smarter than that because they'd seen it.
Well, and that's what led to the collapse of Roadrunner Records at this time. I think they made it like 3 years past the time we're on now because all these artists started to get hip to that. And they're like, yeah, fuck you. And then Roadrunner collapsed. It's funny you mentioned the Def Jam though, because this is when all the Def Jam greatest hits albums were released. Like if you go back, it just had the Def Jam label on it, and then in the small print, like it had LL and all that stuff, because they released all those before they were going to the courts to battle for this shit. They released like as many greatest hits albums as they could.
Yeah, well, and then Jay-Z became president. So.
Yeah. And I mean,
say what you will, I think it's kind of a downfall for Def Jam because all the guys he had on Rockefeller who were like okay but not great became bigger stars on Def Jam, and maybe that wasn't right.
Yes. No, it's interesting you mentioned that because I remember like that and Island Records when they were folding, like it's that pump out the greatest hit stuff. And there'd always be like that one new release on those tracks. And it wasn't coincident. It's because they were trying to milk whatever they could from that artist on that last release there. Yeah, it's wild. As we had in 2003, I don't know, now that we're in the 2000s, there's so many, we're doing a soundtrack episode. We have to do a soundtrack episode at some point.
Probably.
I think it needs to be done.
I think we might have to do a soundtrack episode for each decade we've gone through, honestly.
I'm game for that. I'm just looking at how many of these great tracks are on so many soundtracks moving forward for like the next 10 years. And
so I think I'm really not sure how we're going to pick a song for this decade because I think as we've gone on more and more often, our choices have been so much more personal. Like even just look at today's choices, right? Like something corporate for me is so embedded in my life, in my memories, and it's been so important to me from such a young age. Gregory, of course, has his 2-song stretch that is just like deeply meaningful and impacting in his life. Your song has a story connected to it about your past and how important it was for that summer and what it meant to you. And so I think trying to narrow this down in a decade, at the end of the decade, is going to be impossible.
I love
it's
Greg's idea
easy.
about the survey.
One of these artists was nominated for a Grammy in their category and did not win, even though they definitely should have. So let's go with that person.
All right, gentlemen, do we have any shout outs of note?
Shout out to me. I got recognized by the big dog in Space Force today for my work in standing up new training things. So the chief of space operations shouted me out today, which was pretty cool.
That's awesome. I love that. Congrats, by the way.
Most of the time, it just feels like I do absolutely nothing, but somebody thinks it's important. So that's pretty cool.
Congratulations.
Well, I was going to say, I think you're sometimes too humble about that. Then you immediately went into too humble about it. Like, I don't think anyone understands. Like, there was no plan for Space Force. You early folks in that area are developing what the Space Force is.
Yeah, I didn't really think it existed, and I had to talk with a coworker a couple weeks ago about, because they were talking about like knowing somebody who has a cool job, and I said, "Well, I know somebody in Space Force," and they're like, "Oh," so no, good shit out there. Any shout outs, Greg?
Yes, I have plenty of shout outs, I'm sure. No, I've got nothing. Just follow me on Facebook, Cool Points newsletter, and then I share the cool points there. Yeah.
So shout out from the channel to Little Happy Acorn. They made the first sticker for Out of the Panel Comics YouTube channel. It's myself.
Oh, that's so cool. Can we buy those?
I can send them to you because
but can we buy those?
No, I'm gonna send them to you for fun because I have a surprise for you guys too. So look at this, Little Happy Acorn on Instagram. Cool story about this woman. She uses all of the proceeds from her sales to pay for her daughter's medical bills. She can do so many custom things and is awesome and doesn't normally do graphics, but she took a picture, played around with it because I asked her to, made me a ton of stickers and sent me a bunch of free stickers, which made me feel bad. So now I want you all to go buy shit from her. The next project I'm going to have her work on is for Battle of the Ballads, where it's going to be the three of us gents on some sticker forms, and we're going to go big.
Cool.
And we're going to be on bumper stickers, and we're about to make this happen. So,
is there a way we could partner with and get and like match some sort of thing for the traffic we send
my
there?
goal is actually to sell the stickers and bumper stickers that we have made and then just give her all the money. So I think it'll be fun. We have enough people who follow the show. We actually have whole offices who listen to the show on the release. And who doesn't want these two beards and this wonderful face right here of the Space Force on
the beardless.
Now, if we're all three going to be on it, can we be best 3-strong stretch?
We could try that. So I'm going to reach out there this week. I'm just trying to find pictures we can use to get us all three on it, or a screen grab. And Tim, who is a monster with the Instagram story mode, whatever he used to for Greg and I back in the day, I'm going to see if he can put something together for us to use that we can turn into a sticker. Really cool story for the group. She also helps out Gary B, the casual comic guy, does all his stickers. He sends those out all the time with his AOKs. Somebody I just want to throw all my money at and support for and help and spread the word, because she did all this based on an emailed picture I sent her in a matter of like minutes. So
awesome.
Little Happy Acorn. So yes, gents, we will be on these soon as well. I just had to have a picture put together. And then we will be sending ourselves across the country to be put on comic book boxes, record boxes, and cars everywhere. So fun project in the works. All proceeds will be given to her. I don't have enough charity stuff going through my PayPal, so why not one more? And it'll be fun, guys. But seriously, 2002 was a lot more fun than I thought it'd have. I thought 2001 was like the peak, and I was wrong. And looking forward, it's going to be a lot more fun. I think a lot more personal. And I think that we are going to start trailing off into our own preferences and musical endeavors here. So thank you again. I look forward to next week. We are 2 weeks removed from our guest, Ellen. So we need to see if Celine is released that year because she will bully us unless we pick her. And gentlemen, I can't wait to do this again next week.
Let's
Awesome.
push things forward.
Until next time, folks.